Everyone has those moments where something clicks and the proverbial light bulb goes off, instantly releasing a level of clarity and understanding that was previously absent. And for me, that aha moment, if you will, with regards to photo editing came when I began to understand how the viewer looks at one of my photographs versus how I would like them to see it. Now, if you were to ask me how to do this a couple of years ago, I would have said that it honestly just takes a great deal of trial and error to see what works and to see what doesn't work in order to develop your eye, so to speak. Basically, you just need to edit hundreds of images over the course of a few years in order to develop this skill. But in this video, I'm striving to greatly speed up that learning curve. And my hope is that by the time you finish this video, you'll have a firm grasp on exactly how to do this. And once you can master this skill and understanding, well, it's something that'll pay off within your photo editing forever. So I got a ton of requests in regards to this photograph right here that I shared on Instagram last week. I'm really proud of this image. I love the way that it came out, and the response was absolutely incredible. So thank you for that. But one of the most common questions I got in regards to this photograph is, could you create a video on exactly how you edited this photograph? And this is a topic I've wanted to create a video on for quite a while. And this photograph is a perfect example of this, this technique, if you will. So one of my favorite aspects of this photograph is the light throughout it and the optical journey. The optical journey is basically what I call the way a viewer not necessarily looks at a photograph, but the way that I want a viewer to see one of my images. And here is the raw file right here. So this is the final edited version, and this is the raw file. Once again, final edit and the raw file right here. And I'm sure you would agree that the raw file definitely lacks a little something. It lacks direction. I'm not 100% certain as to where I should pay attention in this photograph. So one of the things that I think is most important about this photograph is that the viewer's eye naturally gravitates towards brighter areas of a scene. The viewer's eye naturally goes towards more colorful areas of the scene, or areas that are more in focus or sharper areas. So keeping that in mind, I think, is a very, very important kind of piece to this puzzle to think about as you kind of go throughout this video. And the opposite side of that is to understand that the viewer's eye naturally avoids areas that are darker. The viewer's eye naturally wants to avoid areas that are not as colorful, or areas that are not in sharp focus, maybe where the focus falls off a little bit. Those areas that are not in perfectly sharp focus are not going to grab the viewer's eye as much as an area that is in sharp focus. So understanding those two sides of the paradigm, or the seesaw, if you will, is very important to kind of keep in the back of your mind as you go throughout this video. And if you think about it, it's the purpose of a vignette. Darken down the corners, leave the center of your photograph a little bit brighter, then the human's eye naturally avoids those corners and is drawn towards the center of a photograph. So that's exactly the purpose of a vignette. So for this particular image right here, I think when you have a photograph, the very first thing you want to do is examine the overall scene and just ask yourself, where do you want the viewer's eye to travel? Not necessarily where you think the viewer's eye is naturally going to travel. Where do you want them to see? Where do you want their eye to start their optical journey? Where do you want their eye to rest at the very end of this journey, if you will? And for me, obviously, this image, I want the viewer's eye to kind of travel along this path, but I don't want their eye to kind of wander through here because there's nothing super interesting on this side. I don't want the viewer's eye to wander over here as well because there's not a lot of interesting things happening over here as well. There are a few of those nice berries. I think somebody said in my video that they're edelberries. I'm pretty certain I probably got that wrong, but I'll flash it on the screen. But they are berries, so there are some of these red berries here. But for the most part, there's nothing super interesting on the extreme left and the extreme right of the image. So I really don't want the viewer's eye to linger over there. But I do want their journey to start right around here, this boulder, this stone here. And I want the viewer's eye to kind of walk through this path, through these beautiful trees, through these berries that are kind of flanking this path, almost like they're guarding the path, to the brightest area of the scene, which is right through here where some of that incoming cloud was starting to drift through. And that's kind of the optical journey. So how can I bring that out? And that's exactly what I did in this final version right here. So once you determine exactly where you want the optical journey to be, then you can kind of use light to kind of, light the way, if you will, to create that optical journey for the viewer. So for this instance right here, first I'm going to use a radial gradient. And what I'm going to do is, let's start right over here. I'm going to make the image a little bit smaller. I'm going to draw a big radial gradient right across this side right through here. And let's make the feather maybe about 70, yeah, maybe like right around 70-ish, I think looks pretty good. I want that gradient or the graduation to be a little bit soft, very natural. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to simply just kind of darken down this side a little bit. And you can see what it's doing right there. And if I move the feather back and forth, you can kind of see how that's impacting it. That's a 0 feather, and you can see how defined that edge is, which looks extremely unnatural, of course. So usually somewhere I would say between like 60 and 100 is kind of where I live on the feather with most filters. But I think something about right here looks good. And then of course we'll kind of bring that power back or bring back some of that exposure. We don't want it to be too dark, because areas that are too dark can be a distraction as well. And remember, we do not want to create a distraction. We want the viewer's eye to avoid that area. So let's just bring it to about right there. We might adjust that later on. And if we toggle this on and off, you can see what we did right there to that side. And then let's come up here to create new mask, radial gradient. We're gonna do the same thing on this side right here. And I like to make the images small on my screen just because I can work a little bit better. You can create those radial gradients outside of the frame and have them slowly drift into the frame. I always like to put the center dot or the center of the filter right on the edge of the photograph. And I'm just gonna kind of tilt this way to about maybe right there. And let's bring the exposure down on this side a little bit. Now this area right through here already had a little pocket where there was literally no light getting in there. So I want to be careful on this side because I don't want that pocket of shadow to become too dark, because then once again, that will be a distraction, which is the exact opposite of what we want to achieve here. We want the viewer's eye to avoid this area. So I think about right there looks good. And let's toggle both of these on and off. So this is before and after, before and after. And I always like to look at this thumbnail up here. I find when you look at a photograph much smaller and you toggle edits on and off, you can see them a little bit easier. So if you pay attention to this area right through here, when we toggle these on and off, before, after, before, and after. So I think that that is a good start. Now the next thing I want to do, come up to create new mask, but now we're going to do a linear gradient. And I'm going to darken down the immediate foreground area because I want there to be a transition zone, because the viewer's eye naturally gravitates towards areas of transition. Now this can be luminance transition, so areas that go from light to dark or areas that go from dark to light. It can also be color temperature transitions, which are what we're going to do in here as well, where areas go from cool to warm, because that naturally creates a little bit of depth in a photograph, and it also creates or kind of adds to that optical journey as well. So I have this linear gradient. I'm going to drag it up through here. And a quick tip, if you're ever putting linear gradients in and you have a hard time keeping it straight, if you just hold down the shift key, that'll automatically lock it in. And I'm going to drag this all the way up to here. And you can see the area in red that is really going to be impacted. And I want this transition to be very, very soft. And then let's just bring down this exposure to about maybe right there. Let's toggle this on and off just to see what we did. And you can see that right there. Very, very subtle. And then let's toggle everything on and off here. So this is without the masks and with the masks, without the masks and with the mask. And you can already see what's starting to happen. We're starting to kind of close in on the center part of that photograph. We're starting to close in on the pathway in the center of the scene, which is the overall objective here. So now that that area is complete, I'm going to come up here to create new mask once again. And we're going to hit radial gradient. Now I'm going to kind of zoom in a little bit more because I don't need to, let me just come up here to fit. All right, so now I have radial gradient, and I'm going to just draw a huge radius right through this area right here. And I think the feather looks pretty good. Actually, I'm going to soften it even more. So you can see that's no feather, very, very soft feather at 100. And now I'm going to bring the exposure up just a little bit in this area. And I'm also going to warm it up as well to maybe about 20, I think looks good. Toggle this on and off. And if you look at the thumbnail in the upper left-hand corner, you can really, really see what's happening here. And you can see that all of this area right through here on the left and the right in the immediate foreground of the photograph has very kind of cool tones to it. So by putting an area of 1, bright light, and 2, warmer light in the background in the center of the path, that creates that kind of cool to warm color temperature transition. And that's also going to kind of pull the viewer's eye through the photograph, or that optical journey, if you will. So I think that that looks pretty good right there. I think I'm actually going to make this radius even a little bit bigger, just to make it a little bit more natural. I'm going to come up here to create new mask. And I also want to see there's areas where the light is naturally hitting on the left and the right side of this path right through here. And that's going to, once again, kind of create that boardwalk or that walkway or that optical journey for the viewer's eye to follow. I'm just going to kind of brighten up the naturally occurring light that was already hitting the left and the right side of this path. So I'm going to come up here to radial gradient once again, and we're going to draw a radius along this side right here. And let's kind of reduce that feather to about maybe right there. Let me drag it over to the right just a touch. And let's brighten this area up just a little bit. Subtlety is key. I'm going to warm this up just a touch as well to maybe about 15. I'm going to come up here to create new mask, radial gradient. And we're going to do the same thing on this side as well. Let me just kind of tilt it a little bit, kind of drag it out through here to about right there. Do the same thing. Increase the exposure just a little bit and warm that temperature up to about 15. I think looks good. I'm going to come back here to this radial gradient because I actually want to make it a little bit larger. Something to, I think, about right there. Looks pretty good. Let's toggle all of the masks on and off. And if you look in the upper left-hand corner of the thumbnail, this is before and after, and you can really see how the viewer's eye or the attention is no longer kind of to the left or to the right. It's all starting to focus in the center of the overall photograph. And I think that looks really, really good, much more defined. So I'm going to go ahead and close this down right through here. I'm going to come down to the calibration section, which is one of my favorite areas. And let's just kind of boost this blue primary channel just a bit. I'm going to kind of shift the blue primary hue a little bit, shift the green primary hue just a touch to something maybe about like that right there. I'm just doing this portion really, really quickly. I'm going to come down here to hue and shift these greens just a little bit more towards yellow to maybe about right here. Do I want to do anything with this? Maybe just a little bit. Now, that's probably a little bit overdone. Now, I always like to come over here to luminance because luminance, it gives you the ability to increase the brightness level of certain color channels, which is great in a situation like this because I want to illuminate the areas where the light is hitting, and especially the areas where we added additional light to it or we exaggerated that light. So I'm going to come up here to green, and if I rock this back and forth, you can see what's happening now. So maybe about right there. Orange, maybe just a touch of orange. Probably brought that green up just a little bit too far. I think I'm going to come down to saturation and just reduce a little bit of that green to about maybe right there. And at the same time, I want to boost some of this red because look at all the red in those the berries. And I like the red in the path as well. And that's going to be one of the final steps here is with the path. So this is before and after, before and after, and now the image is kind of starting to come together. Now the path is the main star of the show, so I want to bring that out even more. So I'm going to come back up here to filters. We're going to hit the plus sign. We're going to do a radial gradient once again. Let me open this up so it's easier to see, and let's bring it over here. So another radial gradient right along the path. Let's turn it to about right here, make it a little bit skinnier, and kind of really drag it out to like this. Make it a little wider, pull this up just a touch. I think that looks pretty good. And let's kind of boost this to a point of maybe about right there. I'm going to increase the saturation of this area as well. Nothing crazy, nothing like that, but just a little bit. Just add a little bit of pop, because if you remember, the viewer's eye naturally is going to go to brighter areas and areas that are a little bit more saturated, a little bit more colorful. So I'm going to just kind of bring that up just a touch to about right there. And we can kind of warm this up a little bit as well. Maybe increase that exposure just a touch more. So let's toggle the entire edit on and off again. So this is before and after, before and after. Now, if you remember when we kind of started the video, when I was kind of examining my photograph to determine exactly where I wanted the viewer's eye to start, I mentioned that large stone in the bottom left-hand corner. Well, that area right through here, let me just close this down, gets a little bit lost. You know, it's a little bit dark. It's kind of covered in little plants and grass growing around it, so it could easily be lost. So there is natural light, there's a natural side of that stone which is dark, but there's also a little bit of light on top. And when you can have areas of interesting shadow right next to areas of interesting light, that adds a lot of 3 dimensions. So I'm going to enhance that further. So I'm going to zoom into this area to about right there. I think looks good. Radial filter once again. Create new mask, radial gradient. We're gonna drag it right across the top here. And what we're gonna do, let me just kind of turn this, make this a little bit larger, bring it down just a touch. I'm gonna make this feather, actually I'm gonna leave it right around there. And let's bring up this exposure a fair amount to about like that. Now it might not look like we did very much, but let's zoom out here. And if we toggle this on and off, you can see that's before and after, before and after. And basically what that did, it brought just a little bit of additional attention to that stone. And that is where I want the viewer's eye to focus on first. See that stone? The foreground and the midground of this photograph is definitely sharper than the background. I could have focus stacked this photograph, but I didn't because we naturally don't see the world in a focus stacked perspective. If we see something in the foreground of a scene, that area will look the sharpest to us. And then as things kind of fall off in the background, they'll naturally get softer. And I wanted to create this photograph with that in mind. So I purposely did not focus stack this scene. The background of this photograph is absolutely soft, and the foreground of this image is much sharper, and I did that on purpose. But now the viewer's eye can see this rock a little bit better, and hopefully they will see this area first and then kind of walk the viewer's eye all the way through this scene. And once again, this is where it started and this is where we're at now. This is before and this is after. And then this is the final version of the photograph right through here. There was definitely a little bit of Photoshop work through here, add a little bit of an Orton effect and kind of soften down the midtones just a touch and kind of make those highlights glow a little bit. But I think you would agree that this image right here, this is the raw file, and then this is the edited version in Lightroom, definitely has a lot more directional focus. So I would highly encourage you, whenever you go to edit a photograph, ask yourself, how do I want the viewer to see this scene? And figure out exactly how you can use light to direct the viewer's attention throughout this optical journey for your photograph. Because once you practice this technique, you will start to look at all your images in the same manner before you start to edit it. And it's really going to help your photographs become a little bit more focused, because once again, if we look at the raw file here, this is very flat light and the viewer's eye just kind of wanders all over the place, versus this right here where the viewer's eye has a very clear path to follow and doesn't kind of linger on the left and the right side of the scene. So using light to manipulate the optical journey, if you will, is an absolutely imperative skill and a highly beneficial skill to work on. So I do hope you find that information helpful. If you have any questions about this kind of optical journey technique and how you can enhance it in your photographs, please leave me a question or please leave me a comment in the comment section below, and I'll definitely get back in touch with you. And I really hope you enjoyed this week's video. I hope you find it beneficial for your outdoor and landscape photos moving forward. And as always, if you did enjoy the video, if you could give it a thumbs up, share the video with friends. And I always appreciate you checking out the video. I know your time is very important. So the fact that you took some time to spend it with me is something that means a lot to me. So thank you for that. And thanks again, and I'll see you all next Wednesday. Bye.